welcome to part 2. And as you can see, the building's moving forward. While I'm not going to be breaking down how to build this building, but many of the tips that I'm showing you and how I put this together is the exact same thing that I do to build this building or any of my other buildings. Today's video is going to be on creating the textures and the cuts. How does the laser interpret that? How do you go about drawing certain textures using JPEGs versus vector drawings? Those type of things that, could be handy, might be more easier for you to work with. Again, the idea of this video series is just to give you tips and ideas and things that I have learned building and scratch building with my laser. So let's move forward to part 2 and we'll pick up where we left off on part 1. All right, I want to get into colors. If you notice, most of the drawings that I've got, there's a lot of different colors involved in them. Here's one with blue and yellow, one with red and black. The building here, red, blue, and black. I think you've seen a couple of these other ones. Might be in different colors. There's red and yellow. So let's get into why we use these colors. The laser understands color, and this is unique. I don't think it's unique just to my laser, but I think all the lasers out there, they understand colors. And a color just represents a different setting. So for instance, these are all red right here. And so typically I use red for cuts. So this would be designed, I would set my power levels and everything. Well, let me step back. So when I send the drawings to the laser doesn't understand layers, but it does understand different colors. So when I send the drawing to the laser, I will assign different power settings to the laser, speed and how much power is going to the laser, and based on the material I'm working with, it'll either cut through or not cut through. Just as a practicality, usually what I do, not always, because I'm going to show you some drawings that that's not the case, red is my primary cut through color. Now we'll get to these grays here in just a minute, but I want to just talk about the colors. Here's another drawing that's using blue and red. In this case, the blue will be the cut-through power and a red might be a scribe line. So what's going to happen is I'm going to assign enough power to the color blue that when it cuts this, it'll cut through on the blue. But I may not cut, I just want to say remove some of the material so as if it's a fold. And this material then would have a different power setting for the red. So when it receives this portion of the drawing, which I will cut separately from this portion over here, it will use blue to cut all the way through and red to go through. Now this is a drawing I borrowed from somebody else, and this drawing is actually reversed from what I would use. Normally I would put red on the outside and blue on the inside, and we'll show you that in just a minute here. Here's blue and yellow. So blue in this case would be assigned a cut-through power, and the yellow would be a scribe. And this yellow is the clapboard. And you can see this also gives you the inlays on the door. These are the windows and the bump outs. I've got some yellows in here to kind of match with this trim in here when I'm doing different things. So again, I can use yellow as a scribe line difference. So what it is just a different power. That's all it's really we're going to do. Here is a red and yellow. This building right here is actually this house right here. This is a completed house right here. And this is it right here. And you can see the clapboard on the side, the different things that are on it that just kind of make it what it is. And you can see here that I scribed all these lines, all this right in here and all through the clapboard is all this yellow. And then once it scribes that, it's going to cut this out. And this little slot here matches these slots and this bump out, which is this portion of the house right here. So the advantage of doing it this way with clapboard is I can set, so basically I'm going to grab this, I think I can grab this right here. Let's see what happens. Might have to grab this whole thing. Okay, so what I originally probably started off was these were set at the same level so that when I drew my lines across, my yellow lines straight across, and we'll show you how you do that, that would basically allow me to have all the clapboard automatically line up just as you see in the picture. See how the clapboard all lines up and the brick all lines up. So I arranged that in my drawing up ahead of time. Let's take a look at another drawing. Okay, this here, we've seen this is the Colorado Saddle Company. And the purpose of these blue lines, in this case, I didn't scribe them on or cut them. These are just guidelines for me when doing the drawing. And when I build everything else around it, it will actually fit into there. Now, I can take a piece of paper and cut this out and scribe light blue lines so I can lay it next to it and actually duplicate this so I know exactly where this concrete piece goes into here and where these middle sections would actually fit in. It also allows me, these blue sections for when I cut out the stencils, to put the writing on the side of the buildings. And just in case you've forgotten, here is the concrete limb right here, and there's the areas that would be stenciled onto it. So there's a lot of things I can do in a drawing before I get started just to kind of help me get the drawing, get everything all set up so that when I'm building, so I'm basically doing my instructions and figuring out how I'm going to build this at the same time that I'm drawing it. So let's get into now the brick. The brick is a grayscale. The laser can also understand grayscale, and what it's saying is that from where it's darkest, the laser is going to apply more power, and where it's lighter, it's going to apply less power. So as you get into this brick, you can see that there's actual texture on this brick. So this black is going to be a very strong cut right here, while these scratches in the brick are going to be a little weaker. Now, at the scale we're working with, the scale I'm working at in HO, most of this doesn't show up, but it does give it some texture so that when I'm doing washes or anything on top of it, it will kind of fill in those pockets and it will actually give some texture. If I was working in O scale or larger, this would actually really pop these textures in the bricks. But because I'm in HO scale, it's really very hard to take a look at it. But let's take a look at what it takes to actually do some of these textures. So I'm going to build just a simple box here. Whoop. Okay, so if this is my house, I would actually take this. This would be this, let's say, a side wall. Well, then the next thing I want to do, if I wanted to do a clap, I would simply begin drawing lines, and I want to draw a line longer, and I'm going to make them perpendicular. And then typically clapboard is between 5 and 6 inches depending on, again, you decide what it is. So let's say I'm going to do 6 inch. Well, 6 inch might be, let's make it say 7.5 inches. So that's going to be about 3.75 millimeters. So I'm going to draw another line. This line's going to go vertical, and I want this to be 3.75. Okay, now the goal then is to take this line, I'm going to put it right on the edge of this line, and then I'm going to take this line and I'm going to duplicate it and bring it down so it's on the edge there. Then I'm just going to simply duplicate that again and again and again and again and again and again. And I'm going to zip out here just a bit. Oop. Okay. And then I'm going to take this line and I'm going to just remove it out of here. And then I'm going to take all these lines here and I'm going to tell it, whoop, didn't get them all. I'm going to tell it to line it up to the edge, just like so. Then I'm going to change the color. So in this case, we can use black as our cut, but I'm going to change the color to this to yellow. So there's red. I'm going to change that again. Let's make it another color. Or in the case, you can actually go right down here and pick yellow. There we go. That'll work. Actually, I'm going to make that 0. Say, okay, there's my yellow. So now that's my yellow. And that becomes my clap siding. And all I got to do is just make sure that I have enough lines that meet across the whole thing. So in this case here, I'm a little short. But I might be able to correct that by simply taking my 3.5, setting it here, and then grabbing all my yellow lines again. And just moving them down to that node. And take that out. Well, looks like we got one that we missed. So that's not a big deal. We'll just grab that line. I made that grow, so I didn't want to. There we go. And then I'll take this. And there we go. So that would be my clap siding. And then if I wanted to trim this off, I could, there's tools here that I can make the trim all this off. So now I only have it just in my side of the building. And there you go. And then if I was going to do a window, I could add a window and duplicate that. Maybe I put one right over here, and then I want to make sure they're the same height, so I'm going to simply draw a line. Well, actually I don't have to do that because they're on the same line already. So there you go. And that is how you could build a side of a wall. Just that simple. Not that very complicated. But now let's say you want to do brick. So if you're going to do brick, I'm going to start with the same building here. But to do brick, you have to kind of use a different method. So in this method here where we've got all the just lines, I would actually assign a power for the black that would be strong enough to cut through the product I want to cut through. And then use a yellow to just scribe onto the product so it didn't cut through all the way. But so in that case, it's all vector lines. I don't have to do anything special. I just treat it as one solid cut. Now, in some of the more advanced laser machines out there, it might be able to do this all at once, but this is going to be a cut on this one, but I need to do brick, and brick is going to be done as a JPEG. So what I'm going to do is bring a JPEG brick in here. This is the brick, and if it looks familiar, it's because it's the same brick that's on the Colorado Saddle Company. And I need to get this, I got this from the internet. You can go onto the internet and basically find brick. Now, typically what you do when you find brick on the internet, you find it in a file like this. And you have to convert it to grayscale. So the easiest way to do that is to take a program like Deverell Photoshop. You can do this in any Photoshop program. And this is the brick that you would get. And I basically, like I said, I get these from the internet. These are just brick patterns that you can download. Some of them you pay for, some of them you don't. I don't know. You know, they're not that expensive to pay for them. I think I joined a couple of groups that I could, for $5, I could download high quality graphics. This is probably, because I'm going to HO scale, I'm not really worried about getting high quality graphics. I just want something that have some texture and things like that. And I download those files, and I simply just download them. Those files are typically a BMP or a JPEG. It doesn't matter which one they're in, because we're going to turn them into a JPEG when we get done anyway. So the first thing I'm going to do, this is the color image, and the computer understands grayscale. You can use the color images, but it's a little more challenging because you have to assign the laser needs to have each color assigned a power that it's going to use. So turning it to grayscale makes it easy because you're only dealing with gray, and then darker ends are going to have more laser power, where lighter ends are going to have less laser power. And the laser then can read that grayscale, and at 0 is no laser, and at 255 on the grayscale is the most powerful portion of the laser. The laser is going to the highest levels. So what I need to do is convert this to a grayscale, and I can simply go to image and come down here to grayscale and turn it into a grayscale. There you go, it's in a grayscale. No big trick. Once I'm in this grayscale though, sorry about that. Once I'm in a grayscale, I need to clean this image up a bit. So right now, the bricks would be darker than the mortar, which means the bricks are going to be carved into the mortar, and the mortar is going to be proud. So I need to reverse this image. But before I reverse this image, I want to also make it a little more stark, so that the effect of the laser, and I've only learned this from basically doing it over and over again. I find that if I make the contrast very stark and do different things, I get a better effect. So one of the things I'm going to go to here is I'm going to adjust the contrast and the brightness. So we're going to take this right here, and you can see my last settings that I used. This makes this brick very dark, but I can adjust it even more. If I want more contrast, I can make it like this, or more brightness and less contrast. See, I can adjust that, and I kind of find that somewhere around here is really good. The mortar is pretty white and the bricks are fairly dark, and that seems to give me the best results. I don't want to get too carried away, but something like this works really well. So now I've got my grayscale is very stark. There's a lot of dark color and a lot of light color, and not much in between. But this would, again, the laser is not going to burn where it's white, and it's going to burn where it's dark. So these are going to make very deep pockets. The mortar lines are going to be sitting proud, and the bricks are going to be sunk in. So what we have to do is we have to reverse this or turn it into a negative. So I can make this a negative image, and now my mortar lines are going to be carved in and my bricks are going to be proud. And that's what I'm going to work with. And if I'm not happy with it, this is what I would then take to the laser and just shoot this and see what it does. And if I'm not happy with it, I might come back again and work with the brightness and contrast and set it up more like this. So now my bricks have a little scratching on the surface. The mortar lines are very dark, and the image as a whole looks really well. And this should look familiar because that's exactly what I've got on Corel, on the Corel Draw. So now I could just save this image, and I could say save it, and it's been saved. That's all it is you have to do. It's in a JPEG format, in a format that would actually already be used by Corel Draw. So here's basically that same image, but now I've got to take this image and I got to convert it to HO scale. So a brick that's about 6 inches long is about 3 millimeters across. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to measure this brick right here, just like this. And bring it to the other corner here. Okay, so that brick is 41.6 millimeters. That's huge. You know, we want it much smaller. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this whole image and I'm going to shrink it down until I'm approximately close to about 3 millimeters. That's 7.59. That's almost 5. That's 3.3. That's 2.85. That's 2.90. And if you're wondering how I know that, because I'm used to seeing those numbers, that's 2.96, 2.98, 2.99, which would be close enough, but there we go, we got 3 millimeters. Now I'm going to take this 3 right here. I don't need that. There's my 3 millimeter brick. But obviously, that's not big enough to do that whole box. So I'm going to duplicate that. And I'm going to take that and attach it to this one. And voila, I now have a continuous brick. And I can do the same here again. And voila, we got more. And we'll just make this plenty big enough to go. The thing about JPEGs, just so you know, the software, you can't do like I did with the lines, where I could cut the lines off and make them smaller. There's some things I can do. I can erase. But I find that that's almost more work than what it's worth. And so I try to get my brick to be as close to the size that I need, which that'll do the trick. Then I can just simply duplicate this down and bring it down. Now you see these lines right here, that's just the rendering. It's because it's so small, but if you got in close, you'd see that it looks just fine. There's no, and you can see these lines that you see here, that's just, again, the program allowing me to see the differences in between there. As you can zoom in, you can see these lines are almost non-existent. And the laser is not going to be able to cut this. This is going to be too big. It's going to cut it just fine, and you won't even notice the difference in the texture. Take this again, we'll duplicate that. Just like so. And if this is big enough to fit into there, not quite, I'm going to have to do one more row. So what we'll do is just select all this row and duplicate it. Nope, I didn't get it all. There you go. And now all that brick is together. Now I'm going to make this one complete picture. And I'm going to group it all together. And there you go. So this JPEG will now cover that up. A little difference with using a JPEG here versus doing the lines is this, I can tell the laser all to cut at one time. In this fashion here on my laser, I have to cut this image first and then cut my box over top of it, which the laser, because it is a digital CNC type machine, I can set an origin and it will automatically go back to that same point every single time. So it's not a problem if I do this. If I were to cut this image here and then load this image in secondly, or cut it right afterwards, I can cut them right back to one another. I just need to put the laser in 2 different modes. Now, the more expensive lasers that are out there, I'm sure, like the Boss laser and some of these more pricier lasers that are hitting, $10,000, they can easily take a JPEG and say, okay, I'm going to do this first and then cut second. The software that I have, it's basically a cheap Chinese version, and it needs to deal with JPEG separately than doing vector cutting. But it's not the end of the world. It just means I have another step to do that I have to do it again. To give you an idea of how much time it takes, so to cut something like this image here where it's just pure vector, this might take, to cut this same box here, might take me, maybe 6 minutes to do the cut and etch everything in here. To give an idea, when I do a JPEG like this with this same size cut here, this JPEG image here, given the size of this, let's just take a look at how big this is. We'll convert it to inches. So that's about 5 3/4 inches. So to do something like this, the JPEG here might take 40 minutes to cut, and then less than a minute to cut the outside parameters, so the windows in the actual box on the outside. So you can see there's a very different time frame on it, but it gives you a very different image. And when we look at the bricks of the Seattle, the Colorado Saddle Company, you'll actually see the difference between those images. But again, that's not that big of a deal. So let's look at some other things that you might do in the drawings. So in the drawings here, let's get the drawing I want. This drawing right here, please. So to give you an idea, to do this main building here, this took me a little over 7 hours to do. It took 6 hours and 30 minutes to cut this brick material, and it took about maybe 15 minutes to do all the windows and everything else. Now this is about a 15-inch long cut here. So that gives you an idea. This is about 15 by 8 inches. So that gives you an idea of what you're looking at in time that's involved with doing one of these things. And the way that I'm doing this here is not the only way to do it. I've done bricks. Another method of doing bricks is, we'll go back to the drawing here. So let's say I want to do bricks, and I want to do it in this fashion right here. So what I could do is I could take my first line and draw it. Now I want bricks that are, say, 2 millimeters tall. So I'm going to come in here and make that a 2 millimeters. Whoop, I need a 0 there. Okay, so there's a 2 millimeter tall brick, and I'm going to take that and put it on the end. Now the next thing I need to do is I want these bricks to be 3 millimeters wide. So I could take this, turn this into 3 millimeters. Okay, so now this is just a measuring tool, and all I want to do is make it just like so, and then I can, that's pretty darn close, so we're going to go ahead and ignore that because we can move that around, flip it over on this side, and now I'm going to take this line here and I'm going to duplicate it, and I'm going to bring it down to here, just like so, And then I'm going to do this real rapidly because this is a repeat drawing over and over again. So I'm going to just go duplicate, duplicate, duplicate all the way across. Okay, that'll work fine for what we're doing here. I'm going to take my measuring line out of here. And now I'm going to just we'll just cut this down so it makes more sense. Alrighty. So now I'm going to take this next line here, and I'm going to first group this because this will make it easier for me. And then I go Control, duplicate that. Now this line, I want to be in the middle of this. So I create a brick pattern. And then I go D, and go D. Get this line out of our way. Whoop. D. Yeah, and I gotta. There we go. Wrong button. There we go. And now I have a brick pattern here. And that can be used to put bricks on here. And then it's just a matter of taking and maybe lining this up, just like so, or lining it on the bottom, like so. And now I have a brick pattern on the bottom. I can take my virtual cutter now. It doesn't matter that it's gone outside the line because this line is going to get cut. Now I need to turn this into a different color because right now I have two blacks on top of one another. So it would literally, if I made black the cutout color, it would cut straight through this. So instead of doing that while I have all these, maybe what would be better if I undo this. Okay, let's make this another color that maybe will work better. So let's turn this into a blue. There you go, now it's blue. That'll work better for us. And then we can put it right up into here. And I'm going to match that corner there so it all matches up. And then I can take my virtual line cutter and just cut a lot of this out that I don't need to do over and over and over again. There we go. And now I have brick on the bottom with clap on top. So that's easy way to create some of these textures. So in any case, that's how we go about creating textures. The other thing that you might do is dealing with some trim boards. So if you do some of these buildings like this, you might have to create some different parts to do your trim. Now in the case of what I'm dealing with this particular building, these trim parts are this up here. So if you look at my parts, these will all stack together and they're all solid on this image. There's no brick pattern in that. So I'm not going to do a brick pattern. I'm just going to cut these all out as a solid piece and then paint them that same green color, and that'll give me my trim work. So there's some tips on drawing and doing textures and some ideas like that. Just to kind of give you an idea of what you're capable of doing with this. And now the next step is actually taking this and sending it to the laser. Now, I'll show you how I do it here. And again, it's based on your laser more than anything else. So in the case here where I've got two drawings together, where I'm going to take these and do them as separate. So the first thing I'm going to do is I might take this part right here and just take it out of here. And I'm going to tell it in CorelDRAW to export this drawing. And the easiest way I find to do this is just to delete the drawing I don't need. And then I say File, and I'm going to export it. And here it is called the Seattle Company. You can see this was brick last time. But in the case here, I'm going to turn it into a DFX file. And I simply call it that, and I go Export. It's going to put it into an AutoCAD format that my laser can read. It can read the AutoCAD 2008 to 2013 type files. In Corel, it actually exports it as a millimeters when you do a vector drawings. And I don't worry about the rest of this because this does not apply this time right here. And I would say export. And it's now exporting the file, and voila, it's done. Then I can undelete the portion that I want, the texture. I can delete the drawing. And this time I would actually take this and I would say I'm going to export this time. This is going to be the Seattle Company, but this time it's going to be brick. So I save it as a separate file, but this time I'm saving, instead of DFX, I want it as a JPEG, and I then export it. And it's going to come back and ask me some questions. I want it to remain in grayscale 8-bit. And I want it in custom, which is 100%. And I tell it to save this as a JPEG. There you go. That's all it needs to do. Now, the disadvantage of saving in JPEG. When I take it to the laser, if you notice in there, it didn't take millimeters. It didn't say how big is it. It didn't ask those type of questions. That's because when you take it as a JPEG, you're going to I have to take it to the laser's computer, and I have to once again scale it down to that 3 millimeters across on the brick. So I will literally do the same thing there. I'll take it to the laser. I'll measure it on the laser software to make sure that this brick is 3 millimeters long here. And then I scribe it onto the brick. So that's basically how that gets done and gets saved and everything, and that's how you create the textures and those type of things. So I hope that's been helpful. The next step will be actually taking it to the laser and cutting it out, and that'll be another video from then. So until next time, happy modeling.